Okay. Hello, everyone out there in Screenland. I'm David Stevenson. I'm hosting a panel tonight of writers with new books about Alaska. We're sponsored by the wonderful Alaska Center for the Book. Have some technical people in the background to thank, Trish Jenkins and Lila Vaught. Alaska Center for the Book does many wonderful things for readers, writers, and books in Alaska, and we're really grateful to have their support tonight. We have a panel of 4 writers, but there's some technical difficulties, and one might be a silent participant, and I'm going to introduce him first. That's Rich Chapone. Rich is the author of 4 collections, most recently Uncommon Weather, the book we're here to celebrate tonight. It's published by the University of Alaska Press. Rich's stories have appeared on both national and literary magazines, including Playboy, The Sun, Gray's Sporting Journal, the Catamaran Literary Reader, the Missouri Review, South Dakota Review, Ziziva, and others. Rich taught in the MFA program at the University of Alaska Anchorage as a former senior associate editor at Alaska Quarterly Review and a longtime organizer of the Kachemak Bay Writers Conference. He lives with his wife in Homer, Alaska. If we're unable to listen to Rich, we will record an interview with him at another time. Judith Lethen is a writer and Episcopal priest. She's a native of Idaho and Nevada. She has lived in Alaska 60 years, volunteering in organizations that serve women, children, and families, including the Alaska Mental Health Board, the Advisory Board on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse, the Council on Suicide Prevention, and the Episcopal Diocese of Alaska. She designed and directed Ungerwilik. I know I messed up. Thank you, Judith. The first in-village alcohol treatment program for Native families, and Walking in Beauty, Roots and Wings, a healing retreat for Native women recovering from the intergenerational effects of boarding school. Judith earned a Master of Arts in Teaching at APU, a Master's of Divinity, and a Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Writing at UAA. She's published poems and stories in Chaplaincy Today, Alaska Dispatch News, Cirque Journal, and Manifestations Journal. She lives with her husband, Chris, and 2 golden retrievers, Ruby and Winter, in Seldovia, Alaska. She's here to talk about her first book. Lisa Roderick found her way to Alaska when she was 25 years old. She became the Denali Base Camp manager at 32 years old and served 22 seasons at the foot of North America's tallest peak. Collectively, she spent nearly 4 years of her life living on the Kahiltna Glacier, becoming a well-known and beloved fixture in the camp among the tens of thousands of climbers and sightseers that she welcomed to the glacier during her tenure. In 2015, the National Park Service presented her with a Mislo Swanson Denali Pro Award for her contributions to safety and mountain stewardship, and there's a formerly unnamed mountain standing above that camp that now unofficially bears her name. Lisa's married to Mark Westman, prolific climber who worked alongside her on as a mountaineering ranger on Denali for 10 seasons. He's also a somewhat unofficial record keeper of activity on the mountain. They live outside Talkeetna with their golden retriever, Harper, who I think is in the background. You might be able to see Harper. There's Harper. Her new book, A Place Among Giants, 22 Seasons at Denali Base Camp, is her first book. John Waterman's immersive explorations of wilderness environmental issues are distilled within 17 books and 5 films, including ESPN's Emmy-winning Surviving Denali and National Geographic's best-selling Atlas of the National Parks. His mission is to inspire readers to protect the planet's natural wonders. His book, Into the Thaw, Witnessing Wonder Amid the Arctic Climate Crisis, is scheduled to be released in October from Patagonia Books and draws from some of his most profound journeys. In 2026, National Geographic will release Waterman's Atlas of Historic America. His wide-ranging expeditions include a first winter ascent of Denali's Cassin Ridge, kayaking North America's Northwest Passage, dog sledding up Canada's Mount Logan, sailing to Hawaii, and boating the Colorado River from source to sea. By taking risks and tackling difficult issues, His work transcends traditional outdoor yarns and has garnered numerous awards, such as a literary fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts. Welcome, writers. The way we're going to proceed tonight is each writer will talk very briefly about what their new book is, and then read a short passage from it. And when all the writers are finished with that, we will have a discussion, answering some questions and talking things about. All right, so Judith, I think if we can't hear Rich alphabetically, you come first. So please.
Rich said he has
David?
his mic working. So
I think I have.
Yeah.
All we had to do is start.
Can you hear?
Figure it out. All
Can
right.
you hear me, Dave?
We can go for it.
Oh, all right, great. I completely lost most of what your intro, so I think I'm supposed to say a few things about the book and then read from it. Is that correct? Okay, great. Sorry for the confusion. The book, my new book is called Uncommon Weather. I'd like to really say thank you to Asia Freeman. Some of you know Asia. This is a beautiful painting of hers that was used by the publisher on the cover, and I'm really happy to have that. About the book, I hope it will serve as a small antidote to the public perception that Alaska is populated by misfits and lunatics, mostly fostered by television and movies, and particularly so-called reality TV shows that depict the gonzo crabbers out in the Bering Sea and really misanthropic madmen living in quote unquote the bush life set in Alaska are about ordinary people. There's a guy who owns a boatyard, is a teacher, a couple of kids, just normal. I'd like people to know that here in Alaska, some of us do get up and go to work every day at normal jobs, and we're not all weirdos. Than the MFA programs are, but other than that, people are pretty normal here. Of the 12 stories, 6 of them are set on the Kenai Peninsula, and 3 of them are set in Bush, Alaska, remote areas. 3 of them are set in Anchorage. The one I chose to read a few minutes from here is one that's set out in an unnamed Alaskan village. The narrator of this is one of the there's only 3 of the 12 have first-person narrators. Almost all of them are third-person. And this one is, the title of the story is called, So, Kenny the Sheetrocker Sends for His Girl. Word around camp is Kenny the Sheetrocker is flying his girl in from Anchorage. Nobody's ever heard of anything like that. Not out here in Quinnahock or Imanak or Calskag or Lower Calskag or wherever the hell we are. Believe me, after a while, these places all start to look alike from under a hard hat. The point is, you just don't bring your girl to the job. Not if you have any self-respect or decency. I mean, you have to work with these guys. It's bad enough the rest of us haven't seen our wives or girlfriends for however many weeks we've been out here building this school so that 6 college graduates will have jobs teaching 27 local kids algebra and commas and shit that even big city kids will never need. But it'll be a lot worse for Kenny having every slob in camp standing on the airstrip waiting to turn their eyeballs over him. At first, I thought job superintendent started everyone's ball. I mean, it's only been like 2 weeks signed off on the electrical and let us start the sheetrocking, and that's when Kenny showed up. And he has to see already. My own girlfriend, Mark, very smart, reads a lot of magazines, would say there might be trust issue relation. If that's the problem, I feel sorry. And given the limited entertainment options out here, you can bet the whole crew will be waiting at the airport to see shows. Outfield waiting for Kenny to arrive. It's the first really new thing I can remember happening for months. When you're a laborer on bush jobs, you're there the day the dozer scrapes the willows off the tundra, and a year later, after the carpet layers and the painters have all gone back to the city and decent pizzas, you're still there wiping the dust off the last door frame, the last windowsill. That feels like job security these days, sure, but so do consecutive life sentences. Of course, now and then you get time off to go home, if you want it. Personally, I've lost interest since the day Marla called to tell me somebody broke into our apartment and stole all my guns and our flat screen, and I jumped on the next plane out to see if she was okay. Turns out it was Marla's wasted brother and his smack addict pals, and maybe Marla knew something about that, since the cop said there was no sign of forced entry. We had a big fight, and okay, maybe I raised my voice a little. Some of those guns had been my father's, and that TV was a plasma screen. But no way was I verbally abusive. She said it, I was like every other man in her fucked up life, her exact words, and then she left. Every other man? Really? Everyone? I guess I'll never know. She won't even pick up when I call now, which is why I haven't taken any time off for a while. Maybe why Kenny flying his girl in is such a big deal for me. Well, the whole camp is on the airstrip now. Virgil and Kyle, the electricians, Red, the carpenter foreman, and his crew, the two rat-faced sprinkler guys from Wasilla. Everybody's smoking or chewing 100 miles an hour like they just heard that the liberals are finally going to completely outlaw tobacco everywhere in the world. Floyd, the boss, sits in his rig, windows rolled up against the flies, looking at us and shaking his head and smiling like he knows something we don't, which makes me wonder if Kenny's girl really is on that plane. We can hear the engine somewhere up there in the clouds, so thick and dark, they're like a huge wet blanket somebody threw over this place. We're so wound up, you'd think the plane's flying a vaccine just in time to save us. Phone ring. Flying a vaccine just in time to save us from some disease we don't even know the name of. And maybe it is. Jules, the plumber, a big Jerry Garcia-looking guy with hair down to his ass and a beard as black as his fingernails, has spent the afternoon unclogging the urinal pipe in the porta potty. Nothing can stop some guys from spitting chew in the urinal. And now he's actually nibbling those nails. You would think a plumber would know better. He mutters something about his girl not showing up. For some reason, I say, oh, she'll be on the plane. I know it. Jules pokes me with one toilet finger and he says, $20 it was Floyd screwing with our minds. I don't even hesitate. I say, 20, you're on. Look, I understand that betting on Kenny's girl is lame. I do. Maybe even evil. But I still show Jules my $20 bill, which makes me wonder, if you know you're doing something ignorant, does that mean you're smart or more ignorant? Now, those are the kinds of things they should be teaching the kids in this school, if we ever get the fucker built. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich.
That's it.
We might have put you last for the comic relief because I think the other three writers are more serious. And I should note also, in case it wasn't obvious, Rich is a fiction writer. The other three who are going to follow him are nonfiction writers. Look forward to talking with you after the rest of the readers. Judith, you're up next.
Thanks, David. And I've written a memoir of my work as an Episcopal priest on the Yukon River. And when I first went out to the Yukon, I was seeking adventure. I just wanted to have fun. I wanted to play my guitar and sing and just do all of that kind of thing. And then I began to listen to stories and I began to be asked to pray for people. And all of a sudden, my life turned upside down as I realized that my upbringing in Nevada really mirrored the stories that were being told to me. So all of a sudden, things took a dive and I had to really come down and come clean with myself and begin to forgive the people in my own life so that I could really work creatively with people on the Yukon. So that's what I've written about. I've got 30 stories in my memoir, which will be published in a couple of weeks. I'm excited about it. I've been writing on this since I was in the MFA program in I think it was 2010. And so here we are. I'd like to read you an excerpt from a story that comes kind of right in the middle. And because of the 5-minute limitation, I'm going to just cherry pick some of these little paragraphs here. But I think it'll give you an idea of the kind of writing I do and the kind of wonderful people that I work with. This is called Dappled Light. And it's a story about Grandma Mary and her getting ready for her funeral potlatch. Grandma Mary was born during the 1918 influenza epidemic to a young woman known as Diva Hadoy, a name that means "who's that at my door" in Deg Hanog. She was later called Julia by the white people who lived in Anvik. Diva Hadoy could not take care of Mary, so she gave her baby to Clara and George Reed. The Reeds raised Mary up the Yukon River in a place known as Bonzilla until it was time for her to go to school. Then they moved to Anvik so Mary could attend the mission at Christ Church. On the morning of Grandma Mary's funeral potlatch, the men brought her body to the community hall. Marcia, Susan, Julie, and Melody gathered to help Angela dress her in her new clothes. Catherine and I, my ministry partner from Shagaluk, were invited to help. Julia looked at me and said, "Judith, take her pants off." I looked up in disbelief. Sweat broke out on my forehead. My mouth went dry. The only time I'd actually touched a body was after it was dressed in its traveling clothes, and then only to shake the gloved hand so the person's strength could come into me, as according to the Athabascan tradition. I wanted to cuss. I wanted to run. I scanned the circle. Everyone calmly waited for me to begin. "Okay," I said. As I leaned into the handmade spruce box, I became aware of two remarkable things: the unforgettable scent of death, and how still the room had become. The first caused me to hesitate, but the second caused me to look up. Grandma Mary's face held such a quality of serenity that I was immediately transported back to the morning the sunlight dappled her face, and she had told me we were to love Jesus and follow him. Follow him? Wherever he leads us? Yes. "Thank you," I whispered. I took a deep breath, grabbed onto her navy blue pants, and began to pull. The polyester didn't budge. I pulled again. This time the waistband moved about 2 inches. I leaned deeper into the box, held my breath, and slipped my hands around the sides of her waist and began to pull back and forth, until the cold, wet pants slowly began to slip free. I dropped them into the black garbage bag that Melody was holding, stepped back, and gasped. I wanted to run outside and gulp in fresh air, but I couldn't move. I was mesmerized by the tenderness with which the women began to prepare Mary's body for her new clothes. She was their mother, their auntie, their elder. They loved her. The gentle yet confident actions of the women dressing Grandma Mary and the soft murmur of voices as they discussed the right way to fold the handkerchief and tie on the belt began to flow over me like a gentle wind or a beam of sunlight. My breathing deepened, my shoulders began to relax, and in that moment, I realized we belong to the things we love, the same way the trees belong to the wind and the fox kits playing in the forest belong to the sunlight. The things we love inform us and dwell in us and make us who we are. Where do love and belonging come from? Where does gentleness come from? Where does the wind as it curls over the hills come from? We do not know, but we do know the sound the wind makes as it stirs the trees, and the feel of it as it brushes past our cheeks, and its undulating dance with the spruce boughs dappling the light that lifts the veil from an old woman's face when she smiles and talks about Jesus. At last I found soap and water and washed my hands, but by then a kind of peace had begun to replace the shame. The following morning at the Anvik Cemetery, I noticed the patchwork of paper birch and black spruce standing tall on the hill facing the Yukon River, and the wildflowers that graced the family plots clustered here and there, and the spirit houses marking the individual grave sites, some standing straight and tall with a new coat of paint, even as others melted into the landscape from age and neglect. Tall grasses and wild roses and purple Siberian iris pushed this way and that, greeting Grandma Mary and the Degaton people with an elegant sagacity that seemed to say, "Thank you for still being here on this river, on this land, with your language, your culture, and your traditions, old and new, showing us the way to love."
Thank you very much, Judith. It's wonderful. All right, Lisa, you're next.
Okay. Okay. Well, this book kind of started with wanting to, I don't know, record the time, my diaries up at base camp. And so it kind of turned into, okay, well, let's figure out how did I get to Alaska? So I started writing a little bit about that. I grew up in Connecticut. I was working at a bank, and my brother started flying airplanes up in Alaska. So I came up and fell in love with Alaska, fell in love with a mountain climber, and next thing you know, I'm running Denali Base Camp. So it's kind of how I got there, my 22 years, all the adventures that happened, and I was kind of in a unique environment and perspective to tell these stories. A lot of these stories are other people's stories, accidents, plane crashes, climbing, triumphs and tragedies, that kind of thing. So just my perspective being the base camp manager. Let's see, I was going to read. So I would say it's a window into more than 2 decades of history, people and events on Denali, conveyed through my eyes alongside with my own personal journey, to commit and to learn to let go. So I'm going to read a passage here. I'm going to read 2 passages that are kind of short, but this one is flying into base camp to start my first season, with base camp under my command, my first year doing it by myself. No, it's not.
Oh, it was when you're flying in. This is the one where you're flying into.
Right.
Start.
Okay. Okay.
To train.
Yeah, to train. Okay. The airplane's engine fades into the background, its roar drowned out by a stream of thoughts, absorbing my mind. I press my face against the cold window as though I could merge with the passing landscapes. A sea of serrated black peaks, draped with ice and snow, floats by in rapid succession. I want to study the symmetry of each ridge and battlement, but all too soon each feature recedes from view, replaced by yet another towering monolith. I am forced by this mode of transit into the elusive state of moment-to-moment observation. No leisure to judge or cling to any vision, only enough time to observe and quickly let go. Everywhere in sight, tumbling ice falls convey their shattered cargo to the foot of these peaks. Arterial glaciers extend for miles south towards the distant waters of Cook Inlet. Clouds wisp around the ridges, tearing away from the summits of the Alaska Range, leaving neatly framed views of an impossibly blue sky. I shift in my cramped seat, shoehorned into this diminutive aircraft, along with a pilot, 2 mountain climbers, and their huge pile of gear. My throat tightens as I grasp the seat in front of me with one hand and the base of my own seat with the other. The plane is aimed towards a V-shaped notch between 2 mountains looming ahead of us. Precipitous walls flank the final approach, giving the impression that we only have a single chance to make it through. In fact, the name of the pass is One Shot, but only because it's the most direct route to Denali Base Camp, and hence the first choice of pilots when the weather is clear. I notice that the 2 climbers are also clenching their seats. Unlike them, I've flown this route before. I know that the pass is much wider than it appears. Nonetheless, I steel myself for a sudden drop that often happens when flying through passes such as this one, where variations in wind and pressure can cause significant turbulence and downdrafts. This time it never comes. And with plenty of room to spare, we glide straight through the gap, and I relax as the vast Kahiltna Glacier spreads out before us. "We made it through the gauntlet, everybody. Welcome to the mighty Kahiltna," the pilot exclaims coolly, with a vague air of sarcastic pretension that the outcome might have somewhat been in doubt. 2 climbers give each other wide-eyed, uneasy smiles as the pilot, my ever mischievous, ever-confident brother Paul flashes a smirk at me over his shoulder, confirming there was never anything close about it. "Doing all right there, Lulu?" Paul asks, as I reply with a thumbs up. Each flight through the Alaska Range is an entirely new experience, a movie I'm seeing for the first time. Today, it's a necessary distraction from the impending agenda to which this airplane carries me. My destination is Denali Base Camp. I'm not here to climb Denali, however. I'm here to train as the new base camp manager, fulfilling the agreement I've made with Annie only a few short weeks before. The next month, the busy camp and airstrip will serve as both my office and my home. Paul begins pumping a hydraulic handle to lower the skis that will enable us to land on the glacier. I feel butterflies with the steepening descent, accompanied by the knowledge that the visual show is over and the real work is about to begin. Then I have this other quick passage about these two girls that disappeared on Foraker when I was up there, and it's called Glitter Girls. The summer solstice arrives. Just a few short weeks remain in this now hollow season. I find myself consumed with thoughts of what might have happened to the girls. Death by itself is hard enough to process, but there is a scarce possibility for meaningful closure when people simply just vanish. That the girls remain on the mountain somehow leaves a door open. To what, I can't say, but it's less like they're dead and more like they've just moved on without us. It's easy to speculate on what went wrong, but we'll probably never know. And I'm not sure I want to know. I prefer to imagine them climbing upward forever, straight into the sun. The well-known climber and author Gregory Crouch once wrote, "Mountains are not worth dying for, but they are worth risking dying for." Crouch very articulately summarized a cruel paradox. Climbing mountains may involve many choices that carry both immeasurable rewards and intolerable consequences. Mark and his friends, and I by proxy, are caught in the middle of this paradox and swept into something intense. I fear that the risks are cumulative and that we're hurling through space on an unstoppable train. Our destination's either a state of enlightenment or a tragedy of unimaginative proportions. Through the final days of the season, I catch myself gazing down the glacier towards Mount Foraker, half expecting to see the girls walking into camp, puzzled, amused, and annoyed at our concern. Sometimes it's almost like a mirage. I imagine that just maybe I see two approaching figures emerging from the iridescent waves of warm, reflective afternoon sunlight rising from the glacier's surface. It's just a trick of the eye, of course, a fata morgana, sparkling snow crystals suspended airborne, the spectrum of colors shimmering across the glacier, and Mount Foraker forever glittering in the sun. That's what I got.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Look forward to talking further. All right, John, you're.
Hi, my book is called Into the Thaw, Witnessing Wonder Amid the Arctic Climate Crisis, and it's going to be released by Patagonia this fall, mid-October. But Into the Thaw is about starts with my first journey to the Arctic in 1983. And on that trip, I was transformed by abundant wildlife and the beautiful light and just this strange landscape. And it drew me in a way that I was initially drawn to mountains in my younger days. And for the next 40 years, I would repeatedly return to the Arctic to continue this sort of search for wonder that I found. And ultimately, the book chronicles my observations throughout these 40 years of the climate crisis throughout the North. But I'd like to read to you from a section about one of my earlier explorations in the Arctic, about my quest for wonder. And this particular section of the book is about paddling alone in a sea kayak along the Beaufort Sea crossing from Canada across the Alaskan border. Days passed as I gave myself to what seemed a dive into the unknown. My Arctic apprenticeship deepened. Along the littoral, the chestnut-backed black and white bibbed ruddy turnstones pecked at tiny bits of krill, then flew off on wings that fluttered fast as butterflies. Globular pebbles gleamed on the beach and darkened with waves, then gleamed and darkened again, and gleamed until I looked away, half hypnotized. I passed icebergs that initially appeared as giant birds, a whale tail, and an alligator in repose. In the Arctic, inanimate forms that resemble animals abound, rocks on the shore, driftwood, and clouds, and they seem animated. I wanted to believe it wasn't just my imagination. At first, the well-lit nights held a pale moon that floated freely on its own, a celestial ambassador for barely visible stars. I often paddled through midnight calms, enveloped in an air of tranquility that I wore and took comfort in like a blanket. Belugas passed below as wavery ghosts. When they surfaced, they startled me as they blew and we shared air together. I had to take deep breaths each time it happened. I envied them. I wished I could swim with the same grace that held them snug as lycra. I watched them as they spun and twisted, untethered by gravity, free as hawks on the updrafts. How must it feel to be so unencumbered, I wondered. If I fell in my world, the air would not sustain me. Eiders ran into the water from the shore. Their grass-colored, white-patched heads flashed as they swam into the air. Never did they fly over land. The distant ice pack fell and then bellowed up in accordion-enlivened mirages out in the infinite plain of the Beaufort Sea. I passed thousands of flightless old squaw ducks and molt, lined out in mile-long rafts as they gabbled turkey calls, hiccuped with strange gasps, and dove under my bow. No doubt they wished to get back in the air as badly as the geese and molt along the shore, all sprint in awkward squadrons on their webbed feet, like toddlers that had just learned to walk. After a week alone without sight of another human, I had talked to every animal I encountered, but fortunately, no one talked back. Whenever I felt weary, I took out the huge bag of dried whitefish that Peter had given me at Shingle Point. The 2 pounds of dried fish fat and protein fueled me with several times the energy of any candy bar. Inuit power bars, he had called the bag of caloric energy. I was alone, unheeded, and no one, not even my parents, knew where I was. I was 41 years old, with the endurance of a young man and the heart of an adolescent. I only considered my mortality while on risk-filled expeditions. Otherwise, I could not have contemplated such a potentially hazardous solo journey in the remote north. I didn't carry a sat phone, and I deliberately didn't bring a gun, but it didn't matter because both grizzlies I paddled up to bolted away across the tundra as soon as I said, "Hello, Mr. Bear." Most of the time I felt confident, although I occasionally felt awash in emotions and loneliness, the utter weight of unloved solitude. I thought it would be wise to wait and hold sentimentality in check until I reached Prudhoe Bay. So I stuffed my anxiety away. It would be all too easy to let go and lose my center in this vast wilderness. I didn't bring alcohol. Once a day, I rolled a single cigarette, even though I didn't habitually smoke. Cigarette fumes quelled the mosquitoes and provided a daily break from the monotony of paddle strokes. The nicotine and tar ramped up my senses as I sat far from shore and contemplated the rise and fall of the ice pack and the sea that rolled beneath my damp rear end, and searched the horizon for the telltale spume of whales that blew mist into the air. I listened to the steady thrum of surf on the shore, the yawp and purr and yodel of distant birds. And again, I listened to that inexplicable hum, like the vibration felt under power lines that came out of the sea to the north. For days, I felt flummoxed and intrigued by the noise, but then I gave up on an explanation and surrendered to yet another mystery of the North.
Thanks, John and Lisa and Judith and Rich. Boy, unmistakably Alaskan stories, huh? No doubt about that. So I don't think we need to talk very much further about what your books are about. You each gave a pretty clear description, and but we could talk about influence a little bit. And obviously, the land and the people of Alaska are influences on your work. Could we talk about other influences, whether literary or otherwise? Anyone got anything to say about that? Just raise your hand. Go ahead.
I think the biggest influence for me on my book came from earlier books written by authors I won't name, who influenced me to go north and chase my dreams and find my own personal Arctic grail. But more than anything, the biggest influence came from the experiences I had on the land and from the Inuit people. And this is when I discovered an entirely new way of being in the world.
Very nice. Thank you. Rich.
Because I had dropped out of school at 18, I flunked out of my first semester or two of college and went into the workforce as a manual laborer, as a house painter and construction worker and I stayed that way for about 20 years. I went back to college in 1987, 20 years after I had dropped. And so suddenly the biggest influence in my life was the discovery of literature, which I had avoided for 20 years. Working on construction, there's not a lot of discussions of narrative theory or anything like that. So suddenly I was going to school I was still working every day on the jobs in Anchorage, and then I was going to school at University of Alaska at night for 8 years to get a bachelor's degree and then a master's degree, and reading and discovering all the terrific authors of the world. So that has influenced me more than anything, changed my life dramatically, and given me the opportunity to teach, which was really one of the best experiences I ever had.
Thank you, Rich. Lisa or Judith?
I'd have to say probably the biggest influences was definitely had to do with the landscape that I surrounded myself with for the 20 years up at base camp, and just the climbers, the adventurous spirit of the pilots and the mountain climbers that I would meet from all over the world. And there's actually a person here today that influenced me with his writing about Alaska, one of my favorite books. I never thought I was a high school dropout myself. Writing a book, it never crossed my mind that I possibly could do it. I didn't have a really firm grasp of the English language and how to make things sound, the way they're supposed to in a book. But definitely my husband, Mark Westman, who helped me with that, with the development of the book. And that was probably my biggest influence, just letting me know that it was possible. And so, yeah, I think that was all the influence I needed, was just someone to believe in me, that I could do it.
Very nice. Thank you, Lisa. Judith.
When I was a kid, I grew up in a movie theater. My mother owned the local movie theater before TV was invented. And so definitely movies have just instilled in me this incredible sense of the surroundedness of story. One of my favorite movies, I do have to mention it, is 3:10 to Yuma with Christian Bales and whoever, that other handsome guy, Russell Crowe. In that movie, for the first time, I really internalized that bad people can be good and good people can have secrets that aren't so good. And so I think that on the one side, and then on the other side, living in Alaska all these years and working with the elders in our indigenous cultures has given me a sense that it's really possible to love people knowing all about them. And I loved listening to both Lisa and John about the landscape, because my first date with my husband, well, my second date with him was in an airplane. I'd never been in a small plane, and flying through the Wrangell St. Elias, flying up to the Arctic from Anchorage, flying out to the Yukon. I mean, it's so breathtaking and it's so terrifying that you're literally on fire with anticipation and watching every move. And so I think all of those things have instilled in me wanting to tell the truth about my life and the people that have shaped me. So I love that. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. The next question I wanted to ask was about what was going on in your life while you wrote this book. Now, obviously, like Judith and Lisa wrote over experiences accumulated over many, many years, but it seems to me like you might have been putting this book together during the pandemic. I wonder if that has any influence, or what else was going on in your life while you were putting the book together. Any answers to that one?
The very first thing that happened is my husband had a massive heart attack after I'd signed up and after I'd gone to summer school, and I came home all fired up, ready to really put these stories on paper. And I was dealing with the, recovery. Then my sister-in-law died. Chaos, utter chaos. The entire time I was in the MFA. In fact, I had to take an extra year because of all the trips we made for his wellness. And we had also started a retreat center in New Mexico. So learning to speak Spanish by singing in a mariachi band or learning to deal with the drug cartels, helping women earn a living who had been really impacted by the drug cartels. So chaos, utter chaos constantly was barraging me. As I tried to write these old stories, all these new things were happening.
It just reminds us that really every book is a miracle. I mean, the reason more books aren't out there is life gets in the way. I mean,
Yeah,
there's so
totally.
much.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Anyone else have an answer to that one? Lisa?
Mine's similar. This was 10 years in the making. Just, I was always keeping diaries, but definitely went through some stuff with my husband, who he had cancer, adrenal cancer, and we're navigating our way with all these surgeries and radiation and taking care. I became a caregiver. And so we've talked about the book forever, and we just started getting serious about that. And then with COVID shutting me out of the mountains for a season, like Denali National Park closed, so I couldn't go to work. And so yeah, we just had found ourselves some time. He's okay, he's without disease right now, so we're doing good. But and then just, I was trying to struggle to leave my job. I did it for 20 something years. I was looking to leave the Alaska range behind somehow. And so by writing all these stories down and kind of getting it all out and, trying to move on to maybe my next big thing in my life, I feel like a sense of finishing this book, as everybody here knows how big of a deal it is getting it done, and then thinking about other things for a while.
That is amazing, Lisa. Thank you. Rich or John, anything about? Yeah, Rich.
Unmute. This is collection, the oldest story in this collection. I read at the first MFA inaugural residency in 2008. So this book is 16 years in the making. But during that time, I also published 2 other books. Actually 3 now that I think of it. In 2010, I published a book of stories. In 2015, I published a collection of memoir pieces, personal essays. And then in 2021, I published a novel. So all of these stories were written in a time period, about 16 years, along with numerous other stories that I did not include because I just wanted to put together just the Alaskan stories. I write stories set anywhere that I've ever been, basically. And the thing about this collection is these were stories that were finally completely non-autobiographical. My previous stories were either nonfiction pieces, many of them. Some, I don't know if they're fiction or nonfiction. I'll claim they're nonfiction, or I'll claim they're fiction, depending on what it gets me. But I have no idea how much of them is real and how much is not. These stories are based on things I know. Like for the piece that I read there, a guy once brought his wife out to this. Wasn't a girlfriend, was wife. I worked in construction all over the state, and it created a bit of an uproar. So I always remember that. But that wasn't characters. It's not a memoir piece. So the beauty of this for me was getting outside myself finally, because I started writing as cheap therapy, and all my first stories were about my first terrible marriage and unhappy divorce and all that stuff. And it was great leaving that behind and just, inhabiting the minds and hearts of people who are not me. There's three or four of the stories in the book are from the point of view of women. I've never been a woman, despite rumors you may have heard. And so I've really come to like writing about others. It feels like easy empathy. I don't have to go out of my way to help them or anything.
Richard. All right, John.
Well, this book really flew out of me. I don't think I've ever written a book as fast or as joyfully as I did. However, while I was writing it, I was injured from the final trip that I took that I write about in the book. It was a brutal trip, trying to keep up with a partner who was 30 years younger than me. So I was thinking a lot about the need for surgeries and aging at the same time. Would I be able to do another expedition like this last one I did in the Arctic? So it was a joyful process because I was able to go back 40 years in time and consider all those trips that I had done where I was young and fit and able to go on little food for days at a time without injuring myself. So I was on a real mission with the book. There was a sense of transformation and looking back over my old journals and sort of recreating the old trips that I'd been on. And again, finding that sense of wonder. It didn't hurt that I was in love while I was writing the book, and still am. So that added to the sense of wonder and joy that was about an entirely different place.
Well, that's good news. Congratulations. So if you had to rethink your life, or rewind it back to the age of 18, and you're not allowed to repeat the things you've done, including being a writer, what would you choose for an alternate path? Anyone know? Tough question.
I know that's easy. I'll just jump right into it quickly. It's all about my dreams. I have 2 recurring dreams, and I've had them most of my life. One is that I'm a rock star singing and playing an instrument in a rock band. And the other is that I'm flying. So those are the 2 things that I would like to do. Either, and preferably not some chartered pilot on milk runs, but flying in an interesting way, like in a wingsuit. rather than with paying customers or imitating Mick Jagger.
It's not too late, John. You still got it. I think you could pull it off. Who's next?
You know,
I'm laughing because I wrote the same, I said the same thing. I made a note, musician, rock star, right? I played in bar bands for 10 years between 18 and the drinking age was 18 when I was a kid. And I played in bar bands in Western New York for 10 years. And so, but then I had children and jobs and all that. Life got in the way of that one too. So anyhow, if I could do it over again, I would have been a rock star. That definitely.
I do recall your karaoke night at the Blue Fox when you and Ed Allen did "I Want to Be Sedated." That was one of the highlights of Anchorage.
Yeah, they don't get enough Ramones in those places anymore. They need some of those old guys to bring back the punks.
Well, when
Excellent.
I was a kid at 18, I had two dreams. One, all right, we've got to get together with a little band here. One was to be a torch singer. I grew up in Nevada. I waited tables on the midnight shift. And after work, the bartender would give me a triple martini and I would sing with the band. Yes, that was it. But the other was a school teacher. My mother was a school teacher and my whole family going back generations the women were school teachers. And I love teaching. I love reading to children. I love children. But whenever anyone says anything to me, I get my cowgirl, hat on and being a cattle rancher. Oh, I would do that in a heartbeat if I could. I would. But my friends are still ranchers and still live in Nevada. And I just went home to help bury my sister, my oldest sister. And so that's still in my blood too. Yeah.
These are great answers. Lisa, anything?
I had thought about this and I thought a private detective if I was to do it again. I don't know, I'm just kind of a nosy person and I love sleuthing, and I go into people's houses and I'm always looking for little clues into their life. And actually, I thought something came into my head today on a kind of a more serious note. The way my mom died, she committed suicide, and that's like the ultimate mystery that maybe I just feel like I need to solve these like mysteries in life. And maybe that's why that like popped into my head, because it's like I'm never gonna know why she did it, but maybe if I could solve other mysteries that somehow would close that chapter or something that's kind of open in my brain. But yeah, but I think it would be a pretty cool job. But
Those are super interesting answers. Thank you, everybody. As writers, what would you like to improve on? What do you, if you felt there was some area of your writing you could do better, what would it be? Any ideas?
mine's very limited. My first book here. I'd say probably I kind of had some trouble with character development. My book has a lot of very strong characters, like my brother, and you just really have to picture them in your head and figure out how to describe them to everybody else. And I think that was probably the biggest challenge. And yeah.
Hey, Lisa, while we're on that, I have a question for you. So you were keeping a journal or a diary all those years?
Yep.
At what point did you think of making it, have a larger audience?
It was kind of the last 10 years that I did base camp things. Yeah, I just decided, well, let's start to put this stuff down on paper. And then with Mark's help, we just started developing writing different chapters about the characters, about the plane crashes. And so all this stuff kind of just came pouring out of us kind of as a way to unleash and unburden ourselves with. I mean, we've seen a lot up there. There's a lot of bad things that happen up there. So it was kind of a way for us to process And then we're going through Mark's cancer. He didn't know how much longer he was going to be around. And so he really got after it and says, we're going to finish this. We're going to get this done. So, yeah.
Oh, very cool.
I think setting a scene is really important to me. I think I can do it, but literally I have Craig Childs's formula for scene setting over here on a board. But I'd like to really do that well. I mean, I'd like to be able to set a scene that you just fall into. So that would be important to me. But I really hear Lisa, you know, the stories that I wrote, they wouldn't let go of me. I had to finally write them down. I would be remembering them in the middle of the night. I'd be remembering them in the shower. I'd be remembering them when I was supposed to be doing something else. And so they haunted me, and they demanded to be written. And I think that's why it took me so long to finally tell the truth, the real truth. When you're writing a memoir, you really have to be able to bear your own self. And so I finally had to do that. And I'm finally ready to let that go. Yeah.
Well, I'll jump right in it.
Um,
Strictly from a craft point of view, what I'd like to get better at is making a reader laugh. I think it's really hard to make a reader laugh. And if you can make a reader laugh, you can make them cry. You can make them care about what you're writing about. But I'd also like to return to writing a novel. I've written a couple that I haven't published. And to successfully write a novel, I know that I'll have to come up with a great story with characters that people care about, that the reader cares about. And I have to come up with a plot and the inherent conflict that has to be resolved by the end of the novel. And so those are all things that I'm wrestling with in terms of becoming more of a craftsman as a writer. Writing a novel, to me, a successful novel, it would be the ultimate.
Good answer. Well,
Well, I'm
Richard,
glad John brought that up. Well, yeah, I think the first thing John said was successfully write a novel. Well, I would like to write a successful novel, which is the flip side of that. That is, I'd like to write one that someone would actually buy. So that's my goal, is to learn to write things that sell more than a few books.
yeah, but you've mastered how to be funny, which is key. Everything you write brings a smile to the reader's face.
Yeah, I depend on humor, shamelessly, and I love to read my stuff in public to a large audience, and have them laugh. That's wonderful. I think being a stand-up comic would actually be my favorite job if I hadn't thought of that, but that would really be my favorite job.
Yeah, for sure. Good answer.
Yeah.
The last question I asked you to think about is really an unfair question, and you don't have to answer it. We could just let it sit in silence. But I said, how do you contend with the hubris of thinking anyone should have any interest in what you have to say about anything? Terribly mean question for me to ask you guys.
It was a terribly mean question. In fact, I have to admit, when I started writing, I didn't even think of the reader. I mean, they were the last thing on my mind. I honestly didn't think it was going to be any more than just an apologia to my children for not being there for them. You know, this is the classic thing of priests. The priest is there for everybody else, and they're never there for their own children or their own families, or they miss birthdays, or they miss things. And so really, I was writing these stories for my sons. And then one day, Sherry, our dear beloved Sherry Simpson, said to me, you know, I went home to visit my aunt who was dying, and reading your stories helped me sit with her. then I thought, oh, okay, maybe this has value somewhere. So, yeah, thank you for asking.
Validation. That's great. Well, obviously, everyone, you passed the first set of readers when you signed the contract to have your book published. So that's the first bit of audience convincing has been accomplished. So
You know, David, I'm glad you brought that up. And I wonder how the others, how much they depend upon that of getting something accepted, how important that is to someone. Somebody said to me the other day, why did you go through University of Alaska Press to publish this book when you could have just done it on Amazon yourself? And my answer was, well, then, there's no gatekeepers at Amazon. They'll publish anything. And what I really want is for someone to say, yes, we will publish your book. Obviously, this is not going to make any money. A university press isn't going to ever be a bestseller. So I'm certainly not in it for the money. If I wanted money, I'd open a liquor store in Wasilla or something, or maybe a liquor and gun store combination. What do you think of that? Good? Yeah. So, it's for me, I need this, my neurotic need for approbation, I guess, is what keeps me going. And I'm just going to keep doing it until I absolutely run out of all last hopes and I'm rejected everywhere. But some of the stories in this book, one of them was recently in Alaska Quarterly Review, which is a very prestigious magazine. I'm very proud to have been in it. That story was rejected probably, I could look on Submittable, that app, and I'll bet you 20, 25 times at other magazines. But I just keep going until somebody accepts something. I need that.
good advice for the writers out there.
I really like this question. I because I thought the exact same thing, like who's gonna want to read this, but I think John, when he wrote In the Shadow of Denali, and I read that book, God, 10 times, and all his stories so fascinating around Denali. And I thought, well, the reason my publisher took the book is because she thought I had a unique perspective. There's never been a book written by a base camp manager. And so she just thought it was a unique perspective. And so once I started thinking about that, I'm like, yeah, and I don't want a lot of the stories in the book and the people to be forgotten. So some pilots that died doing this type of flying, I didn't want them, and the people on the plane that didn't survive, and the mountain climbers. I just thought, well, let's tell their stories. And so, well, and let's just see what happens. So
That's great. Well, I think we're running out of time here. If you'd all just remind us the title of your book and its release date. I know Rich's book is already available, but tell us when we can find your books. Judith?
Mine's A Place Among Giants, and the release date is November 5th, which I just realized is election day. So it's gonna either be a good day or we'll see. Hopefully a good day all around.
Thank you, David. The name of my memoir is A Wonderful, Terrible God. It's being published by Cirque Press, and we are actually planning to have it go to press October 1st. And so we should have copies in our hands by the 15th.
Yeah, as David said, my book is available now. Trickling out there, there's some distribution issues. It is starting to show up.
Great. So Rich's book is available if you can coerce them to send you one. Thanks, Rich. John?
My book is not published yet. I can tell you what the epigraph page says, however, which is always be on the lookout for a sense of wonder. That comes from E.B. White. And the name of the book is Into the Thaw, Witnessing Wonder Amid the Arctic Climate Crisis. It'll be released October 22nd of this year. And yes, it is not a great time to release a book with this looming presidential contest coming up.
Thanks very much to our writers, Lisa and Judith, John and Rich. Also like to thank Alaska Center for the book again for all their fine work. This event is part of Alaska Book Week, which officially is the first week in October. And we really appreciate the efforts of everyone at Alaska Center for the Book, especially Trish Jenkins and Lila Vaught. Good night and happy reading.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much,
Look
David.
forward
This
to
was
reading
great.
everybody's book.
Me too. Thank
Yeah.
you. Bye.